Welcome to Assembly Calendar. I'm Mike Friesen. With us for our program today, Assemblyman Brian Curran. Brian Curran represents the 21st Assembly District in New York State, an Assembly District that includes Nassau County. We thank you folks on Long Island for joining us. Brian Curran, nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Michael.
We got lots of local things to talk about.
Yes,
You've
we
got
do.
events in like each of the next several months here coming up that we want to let the folks in the area know about so that they can take advantage of it.
We want to stay active, Mike.
And here at the state capitol, things are active enough because we are knee-deep in budget talks right now here at the state capitol.
Yes, we're into the process. We're having the budgetary hearings right now, and as you know, our main priority, at least in the Republican conference in Nassau and Suffolk, is to make sure that whatever final budget comes about between the houses and the governor, that it includes a complete and total elimination of the GEA, which we know to be the Gap Elimination Adjustment.
Yeah, we might know GEA means Gap Elimination Adjustment, but what the heck is a Gap Elimination Adjustment? There's probably a lot of people out there who don't really know that.
Well, Michael, back in 2010, before I got here, the state has gotten itself into a very big budgetary mess, being $10 billion in the hole. And they created a formula by which they would actually take money from the school districts to cover that deficit. And now it's been in effect for 5 years. And the formula, as it exists, taking away money from the schools, disproportionately disadvantages Nassau and Suffolk schools. And that's why the Nassau and Suffolk legislators are fighting so hard to make sure that we completely eliminate it so that more money is driven back to our schools in Nassau and Suffolk. And that's our main priority this year.
One of the things I know from decades of watching what goes on here at the state capitol is how important Long Island lawmakers, how important education is to them, and providing good, solid educations for the students of Long Island is always a top priority.
It is the priority going into the budget talks, and I have to tell you, we've been very successful since I've been up here in 2010, and I have to make sure that I credit the Senate Republican senators who every single year make sure that they bring back additional funds for Nassau and Suffolk schools from what the governor proposes. Every single year they are successful in making sure that Nassau and Suffolk schools get their fair share or as close to it that they deserve.
Is restoring that funding that you just referred to, is that looking like that might be something that happens this year?
The Senate Republicans have actually came out very strong before the budget talks have even started and say that there will not be a budget agreed upon unless the GEA is fully eliminated in this year's budget. The governor has proposed a 2-year elimination phase out of the GEA, which I find unacceptable. If he's projecting surpluses right now, then why do we still have a deficit plan that robs our schools of money? It doesn't make sense.
Assemblyman Brian Curran has been making some noise here at the state capitol too about a program known as the Veterans Buyback program as it pertains to this budget process. Explain for us what the Veterans Buyback would mean.
The Veteran Buyback is a piece of legislation that has been in existence for the last 4 years. The last 2 years it has unanimously passed both the Senate and the Assembly, and it went to the governor's desk for their signature in each of those 2 years. He vetoed it. Basically what it does is right now veterans in certain limited wartime actions can purchase service time from their employer if they're a state or local district, governmental district employee, so that they can actually add to their pension time. We think it's appropriate. If you serve the country for a 3-year period, you should be able to apply that period of time by buying it and applying it to your estate time as an employee. What this bill would do is open up that ability for veterans to buy back that time to all veterans as long as you're honorably discharged, and not just for those limited conflicts that we have seen in the last 20 years. It's just an equality bill for all veterans. Unfortunately, the governor has vetoed it every single time. In October, my office had conversations with the governor's office. We were planning on having a press conference and a rally for the bill at that time after a second veto. We were assured at that time by the governor's office that it would be dealt with and it would be included in this year's budget. The governor released his budget and it wasn't there, so we went forward and we had a press conference on it and tried to push the issue.
And we have some footage of you speaking at that press conference, which took place where?
It took place in Lynbrook at the Doughboy Veteran Memorial, and we had about 100 veterans down there to support us.
Well, let's take a look and a listen. We'll be back with more of today's Assembly Calendar with Brian Curran.
That is the reason why we're here today. Both in 2014 and 2015, the Veteran Buyback Bill overwhelmingly passed both the Assembly and the Senate. Every elected official here today has been a sponsor of this legislation and supports its passage fully. After the bill's passage in both 2014 and 2015, Governor Cuomo vetoed the bill, citing immediate and future fiscal cost of the bill on both the state and local government districts. Despite his second veto in 2015 and after public calls for the legislature to override the veto, Governor Cuomo publicly announced to work towards the passage of this bill and tried to include funding for the Veteran Buyback Bill in the 2016 and 2017 New York State budget. With this announcement, veterans across New York State had placed hope in the governor's promise, only to be disappointed with the release of the governor's proposed budget on January 13th, which did not include either funding or language for the passage of the Veteran Buyback Bill. And that disappointment grew last week with the release of the governor's 30-day amendments to the budget, which again did not contain language or funding for the Veteran Buyback Bill. The governor's failure to include this legislation and appropriate funding in his proposed budget is either a broken promise or an inexcusable attempt to use this issue as a chip in budget negotiations.
Some pretty harsh words there on your governor. I see you're joined there by Assembly members Ra and Montesano. I saw Mr. Saladino there too. But those are some pretty tough fighting words there with your governor.
No, yeah, and you know what? Listen, my office has a great, relationship with the governor's office. However, if we are told in October that he is going to include it in the budget and will be in the final budget, then include it in your budget. Don't use it. Like I said, either one, he didn't intend to include it in his budget back in October when he told us he was, or he purposely left it out to use it as a negotiation chip in budget negotiations with the Senate and the Assembly. That's inexcusable, because there is one thing that veterans can never be used as, and that's budget leverage in negotiations. I won't accept that. It's unacceptable.
I guess we'll be finding out in just the next few weeks, as this budget is due to be in place by March 31st.
Right. And let me say, Michael, and to be fair to the governor, just before we held that press conference, we did have a phone conversation with the governor's office in which they assured us that they are working on the bill with the bill sponsors, and that they are hopeful that it will be included in the final budget. Again, after 2 legislative vetoes and a broken promise to include it in his budget, we'll wait and see. I just hope that he keeps his word and it's there for our veterans, because they deserve it.
Let me sneak in one of those local events now that we were talking about, since we are or have been talking about veterans. There's an upcoming Run for Heroes that you folks should all be in training for already. Right now.
Please.
Start right now. Start running in place, because coming up on April 17th, there you'll see the information. There is going to be a 5K run to benefit some of your local veterans groups.
Yes, we came up with this idea last year. A lot of the veteran houses within the district are having difficulty meeting their financial needs with regards to taxes, maintenance, and some of them are closing. And the American Legions and the VFWs, they're important to our veterans. It's an important place for them to go, and we got to help them every way that we can to keep them open. This is a way where we can directly help them by financially supporting this race. Every single dime will go to one of the houses, the 5 participating houses in my district, and all the runner fees as well is going to be evenly split up between the 5 houses that are participating. Please join us. It's April 17th. It's running out of Hewlett Point Beach, and we're hoping to have about 300 runners to 400 runners. So we need everybody to support it. Like I said, it's great that people support our veterans and stand with them. Now we're just asking them to run for them as well.
And if you folks see somebody out running in your neighborhood, it might be Brian Curran getting ready for that event. Something tells me you were already ready.
We'll have an ambulance crew on hand.
Now, I saw that you and a member of the Assembly Majority, Dov Hiken, a pretty high-profile member of the New York City delegation, joining forces on a piece of legislation having to do with textbooks. What's that all about?
We have crafted a piece of legislation. There has been a couple instances throughout New York State over the last year which have shown that some textbooks that are being used both here in New York State as well as across the nation have contained information that is either factually wrong or anti-Semitic or discriminatory against a certain minority, or even worse, it's pro one religion over another. And we had several examples of that in New York State textbooks as well as teaching aid materials. And we thought that it was important that we get a handle on this, and that a commission is created by the state to review all the textbooks being used by our kids to make sure that they're factually correct and that they're not slanted in any direction towards any religion or against any religion. I think that's very important. And that's what we had a press conference about the release of the legislation. And there are a couple of real big examples where we have to start taking a look at this and dealing with it, because the last thing that we ever want is our kids being taught by textbooks that are slanted one way or the other. Listen, they should be fair, they should be given the facts, and let the kids determine for themselves what our history is.
And we have a picture, an image of you speaking at this presser. Where did this happen?
This happened at my office, and also in there is two local constituents who actually assisted me with the textbook creation. One of them is Cindy Gross, who is an author on The Rubber Room. Her book is called The Rubber Room, Education, the Problems in Education Here Today. And this is just one of the aspects that we have to start dealing with and looking at.
Textbooks are always a flashpoint in terms
Sure.
of, they're lightning rods. People are going to like what's in them. They're not going to like what's in them. They're worried about what their kids are going to be taking away from that experience.
Content, and this is such a problem that in Maryland right now, and this is one of the reasons what pushed me to actually create the legislation. In Maryland right now, a bunch of parents actually sued a district because of the content of the textbook and their the teaching aids in the classrooms being very pro-Palestinian and Islamic in their teaching and anti-Israel in their content of the textbooks. And we started to take a look at it, and that's a problem that we don't want here in New York State, and we shouldn't let it come to a lawsuit for us to address it.
I just got my 2-minute warning. That
Okay.
means we've got 2 events, a minute apiece to go. Let's put up the next slide here. We've got a jobs fair coming up. Actually, ignore the date when you see this, because that date is incorrect. This jobs fair has been rescheduled due to weather considerations to May 6th.
May 6th, and it was originally scheduled, but as people back home know, on the original scheduled date, there was a tremendous snowstorm.
You guys you had a few of those this year.
So we had to reschedule to May 6th. The important thing to point out, Mike, is it is a job fair that is open to everyone. However, the first hour and a half is designated only for veterans. So the unemployment rate in the veteran community is so high, so every single year we try to hold a veterans jobs fair to make sure that we help with that area. So the first hour and a half of the jobs fair is exclusively for veterans, and then it is opened up to the general public. We always have a tremendous amount of employers who are looking to hire, so make sure that you come down for it. It's Oceanside Library.
That is the end of that first minute. Now on to the second minute. The second and next event, and the last event that we'll be talking about today, is coming up at the end of the month of March. And if we can put that slide up now, you're going to see that it is an overdose prevention and Narcan training program. What is that?
Yeah, well, Michael, this is probably about the 4th in a series of seminars that my office is also holding with County Executive Edwin Mangano. Basically, it helps certify people to use the drug Narcan for people who have overdosed on heroin or any other opioid. And I believe it is our 4th seminar on this. It is about a 2-hour seminar that is given. People are actually trained in the use of Narcan and certified by the end of the night.
That's that life-saving
It's the life-saving drug for somebody who has overdosed, and it has saved countless lives, especially in Nassau County. So I think it's really important that anybody who has the time take the time that night, come out, sit for the seminar, because you never know when you're in that situation where it's you who could save a life, and this seminar will help you deal with it.
March 30th at the Freeport Library. Brian Curran, thanks for joining us.
Michael, thank you as always.
Thank you folks too. We'll see you soon for our next Assembly Calendar.